Love is in the air here at Wells Fargo Arena. Join the Iowa Wild on February 14th for Love in the Wild Night and February 15th for Pink in the Rink. Get your tickets now at iowawild.com.
Shinedown. Dance Kid Dance Tour. Dance Kid Dance. Live in Des Moines. Wells Fargo Arena, Friday, April 25th. I need your attention. With special guests, Beartooth and Morgan Wade. Get tickets now at HiVTix.com. It's about to get heavy. Shinedown, live in concert. For more, visit shinedown.com. Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Good to be with you for Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. As always, Chad Leistikow here of the Des Moines Register, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. We are with you together, as always, on Iowa Everywhere. Scott, this is our 79th episode together. Hopefully I'm counting correctly. I mean, maybe someone out there says we're at 78 or 80, but I've got us at 79. When it comes, we were just talking off the air. This is like the 2 months of the year, you said, from Groundhog Day to the championship games, right? That basketball kind of pushes football aside. We talked a lot of football last week, but it kind of feels like we should talk about basketball today, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really a page turner to me. And it used to take place after January 1. Now it's all the way up to February 2. And I think that's part of it. Is the playoff and the extension of the playoff and the portal and everything else. And it's just, it's a football country, and it's a football, whether it's the NFL, which I think the Super Bowl has something to do with that, because people still care about football. And colleges, we have the portal, we have, the earlier signing day. It used to be this would kind of shoehorn its way. Today is signing day, the second signing day, and Iowa has one guy. But it used to be as big of a day as there was on the calendar. But yeah, I think for the next 6 to 8 weeks that men's basketball takes center stage, women's basketball takes center stage and locally, and football kind of gets shoved aside until we start getting those spring press conferences. Then for the next 10 months, then it's all football all the time.
Well, when it comes to Hawkeye sports right now, there's really nothing bigger than women's basketball. No offense to Bo Bassett and his wrestling commitment Tuesday night, but he doesn't even get here for like 2 years. So, but certainly this week, Scott, the most memorable week of the women's basketball season for sure, I would say. Why don't we just kind of start with this question? What did Sunday's game, atmosphere, result, what did it mean for this women's basketball program?
Yeah, I think we both could pretty much talk about this. And I think you had the perfect combination, the perfect storm, if you will. Fantastic atmosphere for a Sunday afternoon game on Fox. The ceremony to commemorate the greatest athlete in school history, the greatest women's basketball player in college basketball history, and then also the game matching the moment. And that rarely happens. But it did. And then finally, I know you wrote about this, to have some of the most elite recruits in the country there to witness the spectacle that was a sold out arena where tickets were, the cheapest ones were going for $150 at the top. And to witness that moment, to see that team beat a team that's clearly better than it. If they played 10 times, they maybe win one other. It's 2 out of 10 at the most. But they did it. And they did it because of the atmosphere. I think that was the 6th person on the floor. And then to celebrate Caitlin Clark. It was the most impactful day of this calendar, I think, for Iowa women's basketball, no matter what happens at the end of the season. And it could not have been better for everybody. Confidence in the coaches, confidence in the players, the result, the ceremony, the atmosphere. It was a perfect 10.5 out of a 10 scale.
Yeah. Let's start with the recruiting aspect of this, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of headliners in the building. Two commits in Addie Deal and Journey Houston. Not a surprise that they. Yeah. I mean, maybe it was a surprise. I was messaging Addie earlier in the week, and it was a quick trip. I mean, they're coming out from LA. She's in the tail end of their season. Yeah, like they start their playoffs really soon, but she came, and Journey Houston obviously over from Davenport. But the biggie was Kate Harpering, the number one recruit according to 247, number two according to ESPN in the building. Those that remember 11-year NBA veteran Matt Harpering, that is his daughter. And she, who knows if she's going to come here, but I talked to her trainer, and I mean, she wouldn't have been there if she wasn't really serious about Iowa. And Raina Harmon and Jan Jensen have been, doing a great job recruiting her. They're in on her. She's close friends with Addie Deal. That's a huge thing. And, Kate's friends with a lot of others that I was pushing for. I mean, number 11 prospect nationally in Addison Bjorn from Kansas City was in the building. There was Finley Chastain, down the road prospect, also like a top 10, top 15 national prospect in the building, that a ball handler. And it's just, I mean, that's the kind of situation that this program is in. That's the fulcrum, can they parlay what happens Sunday into something that lasts for an even longer period of time. And so we won't know right away, but we may look back on Sunday as being the biggest outcome of Sunday, not just the Caitlin Clark retirement, jersey retirement, and not just the win. I mean, the win is great. The win is like, it's almost like one of those Caitlin Clark, like, of course it happened, type of things, because she was involved. It just seems like anytime she kind of touches the Iowa women's basketball program in a big moment, something big happens.
Yeah, for sure. I think what is the icing on top of a perfect day. I mean, it was everything Iowa could have wanted and more. And if to sit back and try to be impartial in this, and you're one of those great elite recruits that you can go anywhere you want in the country, you come into this environment. This isn't usual. USC, for instance, which had the number 4 team, now number 5 in the country, or 7. I'm sorry, they're net 6. They average less than 5,000 fans per game. Iowa averages a sellout. And most nights it's not quite a sellout as far as butts in the seats, but it is, so the tickets are sold. But you walk into an arena like this and you're like, holy cow. I mean, maybe it does happen with more regularity at the men's game, but to see that in person and go, wow, this is how they celebrate women's basketball in Iowa. That's got to be something that really sticks with you. And to hear the spikes, as you know, I keep a decibel reader, and it got up to 118 with Sita Falter's 3-pointer to put them up 6-1. And there were other ones like Lucy Olson's steal and layup in the fourth quarter, which I think kind of told everybody this could probably happen. That was up to 117. Taylor McCabe's first 3 of the game was 117. So all these spikes, and you're there to witness this whole thing live. And to top it off, not only do they beat USC, but you do it with a collection of athletes to where if you're Kate Harpering, if you're Addie Deal, who obviously is coming here next year, if you're one of those athletes, you're going, I can play for this team. I play for this team right away. And they're getting this kind of atmosphere, and you've got in their eyes the GOAT. I mean, we see her as somebody who's, in my case, younger than my children, but in their case, is somebody as an idol to them. They've been watching her play. Now they watch her with the Fever. They see what she does. She sits with Taylor Swift. they're seeing all this here. It's like, wow, I could come here and do this at the biggest stage. They went to the championship 2 years in a row. They're having this kind of fans in a letdown season. I can see myself here. Addie Deal already has a T-shirt through Raygun. She had it when she committed. So it's just the perfect storm. I don't know ultimately if they'll do that, but then you look, Chad, at, well, some people say, well, it's just Iowa or whatever. Well, what makes Kansas attractive? What makes Kentucky attractive? I mean, Lawrence is a fantastic college town. Lexington, I haven't been to it. I imagine it's pretty good too. But is it that, Tuscaloosa at Alabama? Is Tuscaloosa just some mecca that makes, that was a yellow brick road? No. It's because the winning, it's the atmosphere, it's the collection of athletes, and it's the coaches. That's what makes, in the history and tradition as well, that's what makes it all great. And Iowa has that now to offer in this sport.
Yeah, a lot there. That's what I'm just kind of feeling, thinking, wondering, just what this turns into for Iowa women's basketball in the future. And it felt like there was a lot of like trepidation, I guess, the first few months of the season, but it almost felt like Sunday was like, oh yeah, like, Iowa women's basketball isn't going anywhere. I mean, it just the fan support is crazy. Addie Deal really is the real deal. She's not Caitlin Clark, but she's going to be a fantastic player for 4 years for the Hawkeyes. She's going to, I would be shocked if she doesn't come in and start next year. She's going to show up college ready, the way she trains, the way she plays. And then they've, let's see what they get in the class. If they get, a gangbusters class in 2026, which it sure seems to be possible at this point, and that would be something pretty special. We're not predicting that for sure, but it just feels like things are really trending in a positive direction on that front. And it's another part of the Caitlin Clark effect. I kind of asked her pregame in our little media session, what does she hope to see for Iowa women's basketball, post Caitlin Clark? Because this, to me, that was kind of what I wrote, was like, this was like, you're finally saying officially goodbye to Caitlin Clark. The Caitlin Clark era, we know it's obviously ended, but this is like, okay, now how do you turn the page? And I just don't think you could have turned the page any better. We'll see how it goes. But Scott, this win itself, what do you think does for this particular team? The Hawkeyes still on the bottom half of the Big Ten standings, but they've won 3 in a row. Now they're in among the last 4 buys, according to Charlie Cream. I think the only bracketologist for women's basketball, at least that people quote. I don't know. What do you see now for this team? They got a tough 7 games to finish.
Yeah. And before I go to that, I did want to add kind of what I wrote out of this was the Caitlin Clark effect is that basketball can be great and it also can be good. And it's not just the atmosphere and everything we talked about that just dazzled everybody. It's also that there's a connection among the players, the staff, the fans, and others teams. And I wanted to mention this about USC, that USC's players and coaches sat there and watched the Caitlin Clark ceremony. And I thought that was really an impactful moment. And Lindsey Gottlieb, who's one of the best coaches in the country, obviously Juju Watkins is named first, kind of like Caitlin, she's Juju. But to sit there and watch the ceremony after a loss, a tough loss on the road, which I'm sure that all they wanted to do was get back to the locker room and get out of there, I thought it was a high-class moment. And when you look at some of the situations that we're seeing in the Big Ten that's involved Iowa, I think it really speaks to the connection that people have with this sport. Last year, Michigan's players providing a gift for Caitlin Clark after she set the scoring record. You look at Katie Gerals from Purdue. After Jamie Cavey Lang passed, way too early, 41. That makes me sick to my stomach. But, giving her flowers to Jan Jensen. There's a connection there that sometimes gets overlooked, and the human factor here, that they believe in the greater good of the sport and the humanity in each other, and they compete like hell on the basketball court. And I think that's a lesson. That's something that I took to heart, because I just think it's really impactful. But that's kind of what I wrote, and I think that's something, a message that to me resonates out of this beyond the Iowa effect. And that's kind of the Caitlin Clark effect, that she's made basketball warm and cool, if you will. It's a warm, friendly environment, but it is the cool thing to do. And we saw that in person on Saturday. But, you know, I don't know if you have anything to add to that before we move on to women's basketball.
No, I think I do, actually. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you wrote that. It felt, again, you kind of got some of those feelings from, you know, the last couple of years with Iowa women's basketball, where it's, you know, whatever's going on in your life, whatever's going around, you know, going on in the country, or whatever, you know, anything you want to get away from or whatever, like Iowa women's basketball just feels like, you know, it's always been kind of like, or not always, but just, it's just a happy place, you know, like you just see so many smiles and joy. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to after, oh my gosh, wasn't that so fun? Like, yeah, I just like, yeah, it was just great. And, you know, and we need stuff like that, yeah, you know, in the world. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it does. It's just it is a team, and I assume, I know Jan Jensen and Raina Harmon and Abby Stamp and everyone else on that staff are pushing all this too, but and trying to get recruits to understand this, and maybe the recruits that were here do understand this, that it is a different type of program you're committing to. You have this connection with the fans, and it's also selfless. I thought one of the best moments of Sunday's game was it was the backdoor cut. So Addie O'Grady drops the pass to Lucy Olson, who gets the bucket and the foul to basically put the game away, puts them up 10 with less than 2 minutes to go. And on the bench, you see Hannah Stolke, who's one of the team's star players, didn't play in the fourth quarter because Addie O'Grady was playing better. And she's like jumping up and down on the bench, like more adamant than anybody, you know. It's that kind of like selfless imagery and genuine. It's all genuine, as you guys know out there. You know, that really resonates with people. It resonates with me. I mean, it's even emotional for us to talk about. I feel like it's just like the beauty of sports. It's the beauty of what this team has done for not only this fan base, but around the world. Look at the video board afterward, you know, from all the people that supported Caitlin Clark worldwide, you know, New York City, you know, South America, Africa. I mean, you name it. They had, it was just a tremendous tribute. And I felt like if they could have scripted it, they couldn't have scripted it any better to get the win, and then to get that kind of tribute to Caitlin after. Kudos to Iowa, by the way, for putting that on. I mean, they just did a phenomenal job. Yeah, they did. I on Monday nights, I have a TV show in Cedar Rapids on Iowa Live, and we have Joanna Stolke Mance on there, Hannah's mom, famous mom, completely different in personality. And the scary part is I actually covered her when she was at Missouri Western 25 years ago. So it makes me feel old to see that. But she said that, like, they had a text thread with her family during the game, and about halfway through the fourth quarter, it's like she's getting texts from her siblings, you know, like, oh, you know, need to get her back in there, and she said she was texting back, no, Addie is killing it, and that's the truth, and that's the selfless part of it. That's the be good teammates, and recognizing the situation, which is, if one of your team's players is hot on the floor, you've got to let her go. And that's really good and healthy for Addison O'Grady. But I think on the game, that was really impactful. But this was a really, you know, a couple other things I looked at was, you saw former teammates come in. You know, Kate Martin's coming off of playing an unrivaled game, flying back to Iowa City. She's as beloved, I think, by the fan base as Caitlin Clark, and Gabby Marshall was there, and the joy that they brought the fans, the community. And, you know, I can say this, you probably feel the same way.
somewhat like the 2016 Cubs, where even though Chris Bryant has really struggled, and even though Anthony Rizzo, his career is about ending, and whatever, but there's a special place in your heart for them as a Cubs fan, just because of what they were. Kyle Schwarber, that's why when they come back to Wrigley, they get standing ovations. And for the fan base here with Kate Martin and Gabby Marshall, and of course Molly Davis is coaching, she can't be a part of it, but Caitlin Clark, of course, that there's a special place in their hearts because of how they made everybody feel watching them. The joy that they brought, not only on the floor in their wins, but I use this like, it's like Iowa's a small town. And when the small town team goes to state, everybody responds. Yeah. It's like, that's the girl that lives down the block. That's the girl who babysat my kids. I remember her riding her bike to school. That's the way you feel about them, even though it's a state and it's a women's basketball team. But they're known by first name basis. I was getting my hair cut a couple weeks ago, Chad, and I'm sitting there and I just try to be kind of to myself. And I'm listening to this 70-year-old guy and this hairstylist who's probably 30, tattoos, 70-year-old guy, white hair. And they're talking about women's basketball. And I think they lost. I think it was after the Oregon game. And they're having this conversation during the haircut about the Iowa women's basketball team. And they're talking about how much they love it and how disappointing it was, but they're with them. They feel like they're close. And that's what people do about men's sports. But now it's about women's sports. And that just shows you how this group of young women have galvanized the community in Coralville, Iowa City, North Liberty, the whole state. And that is special. That's a special feeling. I don't know what the rest of the season's we're going to talk about that, obviously. I don't know what it holds for them. I don't know where they end up. They could be in the tournament. They could be in the NIT. They could win a game. They could bow out easily. But those feelings are just organic. And you can't put a price on how you feel in the moment, because we talk about the 1980 men's basketball team but they're a little bit old, beyond us maybe, but other people who are around for it, and how special it was. And when they come and Ronnie Lester's in the arena, it's like, oh, he's huge. That's the way it is for the women's basketball team in 40 years when, I'm taking a dirt nap, that they're going to come to the arena, and all these young women who are in their teens and, are going to go there and cheer like crazy, saying, I remember them. I loved them. I wanted to be them. I had Grit Like Gabby t-shirt, the glue. and I think that's what is wonderful about what they provided for this team and this program.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the 80 Final Four team. I was 6. I vaguely remember it. I do. The Steve Waite bucket against Georgetown is still in my mind. But you think about, Kenny Arnold when he passed away, just when he was going through all those health struggles. Just how much support and good feelings, and not for the situation, but just sort of rallying around this team and the 80 Final Four team, rallying around Kenny. And I know we both did, some articles on that, and it was super emotional. And you're right. For people that experience that is similar to what I feel like, people feel about these past couple of years. So good analogy by you. Just imagine if, one of those players is going through something 10, 20 years from now, everybody who was a part of this is going to rally around it, Yeah. Obviously you don't wish that on anyone, but I'm just saying, that's the type of emotional connection, I guess, right? That we're talking about.
Yeah. And the entire 80s was like that with men's basketball. Yeah. And and we know what's going on today, but back then, when we grew up in it, because we graduated the same year, we're only a few months apart in age. So to think of the voice, the color voice of the radio, Bobby Hansen, is beloved in part because of that era. It wasn't that he missed the free throws against Villanova in the Sweet 16, but it's because he was a part of this this fraternity of Iowa players, and it goes all the way up through their first couple of years of Tom Davis. That Roy Marble, no matter what his legal troubles were before he passed, that he still carried a special place in the heart of those people, and you can go on and on. Andre Banks to the Twin Towers. We know who you're talking about, and they felt that way. Greg Stokes and Michael Payne and Todd Birkenpass and Brad Lowhouse. All of them still have that special place in the hearts of those who were around. We were tweens and teens through that era, and I still remember it fondly. I remember it very well from that era. And I think that's the same thing that these young women have provided, and in a different way, because women's basketball, when we're talking about the Final Four team, it wasn't even an NCAA sport. It was still on the outside looking in.
Yeah, so, 82. Yeah.
And then you look at the career arc of Lisa Blutter. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say she is one of the most important figures in women's sports history, to go from where she was. She was playing at Northern Iowa when it wasn't an NCAA sport. She took her first job at 23 as a head coach at St. Ambrose College back then, where maybe they got 50 people there, parents, maybe, to finishing her career where 20 million people watched that final game. And one of the lines I thought was very poignant and right on was at the end. She goes, talking about investing in women's sports. And she said, it's not only the smart thing to do or right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Because why? That whole damn arena was filled. People were paying hundreds of dollars for a ticket. 20 million people watched the championship game last year. Caitlin Clark's the most recognizable female athlete in the world now. And that's where the investment comes. And Iowa fans know it all very well. And I think Lisa Blutter, Jan Jensen as a byproduct, but then also Caitlin Clark has really changed the game the way they wanted to. Because, again, it's the cool thing to do now.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I'm glad you gave it. And now Lisa Blutter's sitting next to David Letterman.
I know. Exactly.
How crazy is this world? This changed so much in the last 2 years, since they made that first Final Four run. It really is crazy. It's only been 23 months, 22 months. I mean, wild. 22, of course, right? Real quick on this particular team, I like how it's coming together. I could see this team making a run. The schedule gets really tough. Thursday night, tonight, as you guys are listening to this, at Minnesota. This is another one of the teams on Charlie Cream's last 4 buys. And then another one, Nebraska, Monday in Lincoln, also among the last 4 buys. So 2 huge games for the Hawkeyes here to try to continue that momentum, not have a little bit of a USC hangover, but I like the way they're playing. Lucy Olson, what you wanted out of her, playing at a high level all of a sudden, had the big game out in Seattle. Now she puts up 28, the highest she's had as a Hawkeye. You've got the platoon. I've talked about this a few times, kind of the righty-lefty platoon at the 5, right, with Hannah Stuelke and Addie O'Grady. You just play to whatever they got on the mound out there, basically. Yeah. And Sita Fulter, don't forget, had a knee surgery, not too long ago. She's still coming back. I like what Taylor McCabe's bringing them. I love what Kylie Feuerbach does defensively. I mean, she was tremendous against Juju Watkins early in that game to set the tone. Aggressive defense. Please just watch her play the game defensively. Watch her play fast, and she gives all out effort. Is really an intangible player that is underappreciated, and you'll see a story from me maybe this morning out there on that. But I just like how the team's coming together. We'll see what happens. Maybe they make the NCAA tournament. Maybe they don't. Maybe they make a run. Maybe they don't. But I think our conclusion is that Sunday was just a big day, positive day for Iowa women's basketball overall. I don't know where it goes, but any final thoughts on kind of the women's season where it's at right now?
Yeah, it's good for them to kind of get into this win streak. And kind of the placement of the game was important. You were out at the West Coast, and I'm sure it made them sick to their stomachs thinking about the loss to Oregon or the Nebraska loss for that matter, because those were a couple of games that really would have salted them away as far as being an NCAA tournament team and giving them a mulligan. But going forward, it was really the confidence that they got from this win. Is something that they needed in the worst way, and Lucy Olson in particular. But I think that they have to put it in the rearview mirror too, because Minnesota and Nebraska, these are teams in their neighborhood, in their block, as you mentioned, last four in. You've got to take care of business in one of these games, in my opinion, to really salt away. Because looking at the 7 games left in the regular season, 2 of them should be layups. Rutgers and Wisconsin. They're at home, bad teams, take care of business games. Out of the other 5, I think at Ohio State on President's Day and UCLA at home, let's just say you can't really count on them being victories. Yes, you could pull it out and have a great win, but I'm going to be realistic on that one and say that might not happen. The other 3 are all on the road. Minnesota, Nebraska back-to-back, and then at Michigan are featuring teams that Iowa is they're in that neighborhood. That's head-to-head wins. That's going to vault you up. That's going to solidify you or fall you down to where, oh my gosh, you got to win a game or 2 in the Big Ten tournament to really put yourself in there. And when you look at Minnesota in particular, they have some deficiencies in some ways. They're not a great offense, but they take care of the basketball and value it possession by possession. They're number 1 in assist to turnover ratio. And I think there are 2 areas that really have concerned me for Iowa all year. And they were able to mitigate some of them on the other day, but they've got to continue to do that. One is value the basketball better, that they don't have Caitlin Clark passing. Don't try to beat Caitlin Clark passing the ball. And so I think that's going to come into play against Minnesota. Cut your turnovers down, play aggressive, but be smart. I think if they can do that possession by possession, that they have a chance to win that game. The second one, and this one is really important, is Nebraska. Nebraska is an outstanding 3-point shooting team, perimeter-wise. They lead the Big Ten in 3-pointers per game. They're second in 3-point percentage. They torched Iowa, as we remember, in the early part of that game and then throughout. Iowa is the worst team in the Big Ten when it comes to 3-point defense. So Iowa's going to have to really be careful here when they go there. They're going to have to close out. They're going to have to really stay on some of the 3-point shooters. And then they're going to have to, last time they were able to get Alexis Markowski in foul trouble, they're going to have to do that again. That said, these should be close competitive games. Iowa's been in close competitive games throughout the entire season. Can they apply the confidence that they acquired and not rest on it, but move forward with putting that in a rearview mirror and take care of business? Sure, they can go 2-0 in these games, but at a minimum, you need to win one of them, to me.
Well, they're 19 for 19 in the fourth quarter from the free throw line in the last 2 games. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they're growing. They're getting better. I think they need 4 of the last 7 to make sure they get into the tournament. I think 3 probably gets them right in on that bubble. Maybe they have to go to the first 4. So I think you need, of those 3 road games you said, Scott, I think they need to get 2 of them to be sure that they're safely in the field. But, a lot to play out here. Hopefully your 2025, folks, is off to a great start with GameDay Men's Health. If you haven't taken the plunge yet, want to remind you that GameDay Men's Health can help you feel like you're in your 20s again. They are really excited about what they can do for you in terms of weight loss. And hopefully by now that kind of their bread and butter is that testosterone replacement therapy, which I can say has been great for me. Most of us, as we get older, us guys, we lose some tea as we get on with our years, but you don't have to. You can stay in the game longer. You can still be a 40 minutes a game player, Scott, with GameDay Men's Help. You don't have to play deep bench minutes. You can play every down minutes, or whatever, every down player, every snap, Improve your energy, your mood, your performance on and off the field by partnering with GameDay Men's Health. They have offices in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty. So check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com to set up your free private visit to no obligation consultation. We love you, GameDay Men's Health. Thanks for being a part of Legends and Listeners. Scott, I had a little bit of Indiana fever talk on my list, but maybe we can skip that. It's up to you. Do you want to go a little bit of fever excitement? Can skip that.
Yeah.
Men's hoops, or I've got some football stuff that's kind of interesting going on.
I do think we need to talk men's basketball here. Significant injury to Iowa's season, and it's the kind that really. It can not only derail a season, but change the course of a program. And that is, Owen Freeman ending the season with surgery on a broken finger. That it kept him out, obviously, Tuesday's game, but for the rest of the season. And it's unfortunate for Iowa. He was their leading scorer, rebounder, one of the best in the Big Ten, probably a second to third teamer, I would say, in the Big Ten this year. And his presence on a team that is already, I can't stress enough how bad they are when it comes to rebounding margin. I mean, they are by far the worst. In fact, in looking at it, the disparity between them and 17th place Minnesota is greater than the disparity between 4 and 14 in the Big Ten. And so now you lose your leading rebounder. It's something you just can't overcome as a program. So, but I'll say this. I was at the game on Tuesday night. They played their ass off. They played really, really hard against a really good Purdue team that's ranked 7th in the country, that has, a couple of the best players in the Big Ten. Certainly Braden Smith is as good of a point guard as there is in the Big Ten, if not the country. So that was, to have it tied at the half, and it was only a late logo 3 from Braden Smith. How appropriate in that building to have the logo 3 at the buzzer from being an Iowa lead. But, the first 5 minutes of the second half really cost them, and, thwarted a really strong, effort towards an upset and a 90-81 loss.
Yeah, Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford combined for 50. That's what you're going to need to have a chance going forward. So much of a gap inside. I mean, Riley Mulvey and Evan Braun's obviously now kind of your only true centers left. Obviously, you can throw Elijah Dembele in there a little bit, but his production has really tailed off this year. So it's going to have to be, to win any games the rest of the way, it's going to have to take what they got from Sanford and Dix last night or Tuesday night, and then still wasn't enough. Which that's just the reality of where this team is right now. It just really hasn't come together. Scott, they are in a 3-way tie currently for 12th place as we speak. This is before Wednesday night's games. At 4-7 in Big Ten play, and obviously. Wins are going to be really tough to come by the rest of the way. Only 15 make the Big Ten tournament, Scott. And so the possibility really is here that the end of the last game of this season, Scott, could be Sunday, March 9th at Nebraska, unless they find a way to do something that maybe I'm not really expecting right now.
Yeah, you're right. I think it could be that game, either Nebraska or at Northwestern. And in looking ahead, and I use these figures before Monday or on Monday, going into the Purdue game, the remaining schools were 32-21 coming to Carver in the Big Ten, and the road ones were 25-31. If you're wanting to win a championship, those are the numbers you want. You want the better teams coming home, and then the worst teams on the road, as opposed to way it's set up, which is you've got Purdue this week, then you're playing Wisconsin, who's 8-4 this weekend. You've got Michigan State later on, Oregon, which is really slumped, and I still don't know how that they're ranked in the Big Ten the way they have been almost all year. But you're going on the road, and you got like winnable games. If you had Freeman, you'd feel like you'd have a shot at, which is at Rutgers, at Northwestern, at Nebraska. But Rutgers has 2 of the most talented players in the country. Northwestern is playing well. They're not a bad team. They lost their leading scorer too, so they're in kind of a similar spot. And then Nebraska, Iowa kind of broke Nebraska with that overtime win a couple weeks ago, but I think they've won a couple of games in a row. They're looking much better. And the only, and so when you start to look at, can they even get to Indianapolis? They got to beat Washington. That's one that they have to beat because they're in last place. And if you don't beat them, then don't even worry about it. Penn State, you hold the tiebreaker, so maybe you've got that. So then it comes down to, again, those teams that we're talking about. You're playing Rutgers, Nebraska, and Northwestern. And how you perform against them even it gives you a prayer of getting to Indy. But then the rest of the games, going to Illinois, even when Iowa had great teams, going to Illinois was like, okay, you're going to take your L and you're going to like it or not like it. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I've seen some great Iowa teams that have gone down by 20 there. Michigan State at home. I mean, yeah, they've lost 2 in a row now on the West Coast swing, but I don't think you predict, beating the Spartans this year. Wisconsin this week. That was one where I kind of thought maybe they'd flex their rivalry muscles, but that was before Freeman. That's a tough game. So I don't like the way it sets up, and let alone last night, they announced 84-45 for people in the arena for the number 7 team in the country that you've played for more than 100 years. It's somewhat of a basketball rival. It was probably closer to 5 in the arena. And I don't know what Saturday brings, but even so, it's, I think it's a tall order. Getting to Indy is probably the only happy destination left for this team.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak right now, but we'll see what happens Saturday. I'm with you. I think if they're going to win one, that maybe you wouldn't expect on the schedule, it would be, you're going to get a decent atmosphere. You always do at Carver on the weekends. People have planned this for a while. They're probably going to come to the game still. They're going to, if Iowa can get out to a good start, they love to beat the Badgers. Ken Palm has Iowa losing by 6, but you never know. Maybe you get another, I think you get a good effort from these guys until the finish. But obviously, disappointing that Owen Freeman can't play the rest of the year, for sure. So just kind of another checkpoint in this dark season. But I think we got some plans to talk more hoops next week, Scott. But do you want to move into a couple football items now, or you got anything else?
Let's do that. Let's just say, with moving on to football, Chad. Today's signing day, which is usually a big deal. Iowa does sign one player, that Jacob Wallace from DeMatha Catholic, and kind of an interesting find. This is that Phil Parker special, where late in the process, all of a sudden there's Deshaun Lee, all of a sudden there's Kayvon Merriweather. Over and over. And of course, it was way different before the second signing period came up. 17, was 18, something like that, where you can sign in December. But Iowa, I have Iowa right now, Chad, at 108 scholarships or 108 players, 83 scholarships. And now I'm sure a couple of players like Caden Weegan, Hayden Large, who now can come back. Maybe they get put on scholarship, or Jackson Rexroth. I would anticipate, I don't know what you think, but I would anticipate when you get into after spring ball, a couple of people realize their place in the world, and it doesn't probably include seeing the field. And maybe it's, if you value football, it's time to get on and go somewhere else. But overall, I thought it was an interesting move, because I wonder now, when we get a chance next to talk to Kirk Ferentz, does this mean that, okay, they're going to, that they're not going to look for a corner, in the free agent market, or are they going to stand pat? Is this, you start thinking about money. Is this a way to say, you know what, we just can't afford, a decent corner, and we figure the 4 or 5 that we've got, a couple of them will grow, and they'll be in, Michael Ojemudia and Matt Hankins, and we'll go with it that way. I think that's kind of interesting the way that they're piecing together this roster.
Yeah. So Kirk Ferentz was on the Gary Dolphin podcast this week. And he was only on there for like 5-6 minutes maybe, but he did kind of talk about how they've got some guys participating this spring, and we knew this. They're kind of going to see where they're at in terms of roster spots. They don't have a guarantee. They've got some guys they've promised the roster spots to, some guys they haven't, so they're going to try to fight for those. Obviously, when we get a chance to talk to Kirk, we'll kind of see where those things are at. And then I thought he made one other little newsy comment that I mean, it's not like anything surprising, but he did say Brendan Sullivan is coming back. I think there was a lot of curiosity, hey, now that they've got Mark Gronowski, what's Brendan Sullivan going to do, and obviously we never saw him enter the portal or anything like that. But the way Kirk talked about him, he seemed like pretty excited about having both him and Gronowski back. And so I think if you're, obviously that could change at the end of spring, potentially, like if he gets beat out and, for the second team job. But all in all, I feel like that's another good development in this quarterback room, Scott. I mean, if you could get a Gronowski, Sullivan 1-2, and I'm not, it'd be great, if Hank Brown, has an awesome spring and he's like, oh, I'm the quarterback of the future, I'm going to be 2. But if you have Gronowski and Sullivan as your 1-2, I feel like Sullivan's kind of like a perfect type of backup because you don't really have to change the system for either one of them once you get to the games in the fall. If you had to plug him in for a series, you could. And if you feel good about it. So I don't know. I thought that is a very minor newsy thing, but I think an important one for this program.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that, so thank you for cluing me in so I can do that when I hit the road and go pick up my daughter in a few hours. That is important because there are things that we see, and there is a market for backup quarterbacks in today's world. We've seen it, a guy like Jack Tuttle bounced around for like 3 or 4 years as kind of that NIL backup and, step in, play. And just like with the NFL, it's kind of the same way. And if Brendan Sullivan takes that role, he's got respect of his teammates. They like him. He's, we talked about it before as far as what he is and what he isn't. And, I don't know that he can lead you to a championship, but I think he can lead you to victories. And I think he can do some things for this team that can win games. And even if it's whether it's in action or it's doing different things, and maybe he'll explore and maybe since Tim Lester is no longer on the road, maybe he can explore some ideas and some creative ways to put him on the field. But I've gone over the roster. I went over all the people who have announced and when they're leaving through the portal and everything. And I have 25 walk-ons. There are a few that you kind of wonder about. I mean, the one, the unfortunate part of it is they're going to have to be ultra selective when it comes to bringing in a preferred walk-on. There are only a couple of each position. Instead of having like 10 on the offensive line, I only have 2 right now. And maybe they bring in one other one and stuff. And again, I think there are some scholarship guys that have, you might. It's a different world than it was.
Yeah, it is.
You don't have space. You can't just say, "Yeah, we love you," and one or two of them, they're getting their degrees now. If you're not in the 2 deep and you got your degree, you might want to go play football somewhere else or get that first full-time job.
Yeah. Ferentz not doing a spring presser a signing day presser. I mean, they only had one guy, so not sure when we'll talk to him next, probably right before spring practice, which begins, they said on the podcast, March 26th. So a little bit of a later start there for the Hawkeyes. And speaking of spring football, Scott, Nebraska football, not alone, but made some waves this past weekend when Matt Rhule said they're going to put a halt to the spring game, Scott. And Nebraska spring game, drew 60,000 plus last year to Memorial Stadium. It's a moneymaker. I mean, they pay to come into that game. But Matt Rhule is is saying the word tampering doesn't exist anymore. It's an absolute free, open, common market. I don't necessarily want to open up to the outside world and have people watch our guys and say, hey, he looks like a pretty good player. Let's go get him. So interesting comments from Matt Rhule. I don't know how they've been received by Husker fans, but that's a spring game that was also on BTN. So you're turning down a lot of exposure, fan goodwill, excitement, all this stuff to make sure you keep your roster. I guess it's a very interesting move at a place like that. First of all, what's your reaction when something like this happens?
Well, you obviously your eyebrows are going to furl with this and go, whoa, that's a big deal, because at Iowa it's not a big deal. And it's weird. There are certain schools, Ohio State, Nebraska, the spring game is huge. At Iowa or Wisconsin or, Michigan, it's like, it's just and part of it's the way it's structured. Nebraska is structured as a game. Iowa has never done that under Kirk Ferentz. And now I do know that, some of the things he said, which obviously caught everybody's attention, I don't know if he embellished, but he, was a lot of the main reason is because of getting down to 105 that they don't have the depth to play a full spring game. You got guys who are injured and still recovering from their surgeries. You've got players leaving, players who have left. They lost a ton in the portal. 30 plus players in the portal, and a lot of them were kind of like with Iowa. Iowa lost a lot of players too, but a lot of them are walk-ons who, just sorry, here's the opportunity to go. I think this is the way it's going to end up, and this is why. My idea, of moving spring football to June, I think it makes sense, because when there's so much free-flowing movement, and tampering is a major part of this. Every program has A, had it done to them, and B, have probably done it themselves. Kirk did get suspended for it. So I think that, if you could limit those opportunities, which is, we're just going to let this scout from Kansas State, LSU, walk into Memorial Stadium and sit up there and go, this third team wide receiver looks like he might be a player, and he's not getting a lot of run here. Let's see if we make a run at him. I think that's what I would expect. I don't know. What's your reaction?
Well, Matt Rhule is not alone. Steve Sarkisian on Tuesday night said they're, or at least reportedly, would not have a spring game in 2024, at least considering that, based on the wear and tear of a 16-game season, according to Chip Brown over there. So it could be a growing trend. One person I talked to on the Hawkeye staff was also mentioning kind of like, number one, it's, that you'd almost rather have a closed practice, because you kind of lose a practice when you have to put on a game and all that stuff and do the autographs. It's good. It's all good stuff, but you know how Iowa is. They like to get to work, and work in the dark and that kind of thing. And so, and the roster limits. Let's face it. You just don't have as many bodies in the spring, like you said. So, it makes us, and a lot of guys, like Brian Allen, for example, he's not going to be around. He's not participating in spring, So I just wonder we don't know yet, but what Iowa will do. Maybe they won't have a spring game this year. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what they do. And maybe they don't want Rob Howe posting, the full video, of every snap, it's, I could see it going away, unfortunately, which it's a great tool for us in the media to be able to see that and just get eyes on these players in the spring. Maybe there's other ways that Iowa could work with us, maybe to get some practice access or something like that, so we can report to the fans without having 100,000 views on YouTube or something like that. But anyway, what are your thoughts on Iowa having a spring game or not?
Yeah, I could understand it, and under the same lights. Again, Iowa's lost a ton of walk-ons who were really instrumental, because some of them got hurt, but not nearly as many as the starters because they didn't play have the physical grind, and you don't have the backups you did that can kind of go out there and run 2s and 3s, and yes, in some ways I kind of roll my eyes, it's like, come on, Iowa, you can have one out of your almighty 15 practices in the spring. You can go out there and have people watch them, and maybe you say, you know what, we're not going to treat this any differently than practice number 10. Maybe it isn't a scrimmage, maybe it's something else, and then people could say, forget it, I'm not even going to go to that.
Go have it at Regina.
Just have it, or maybe they have it and we watch it and that's it, and maybe it's
did that one year. Was that the COVID year? They renovated. When they renovated it, I remember that.
Yeah, and I remember in 2009 that they tore out the turf or the grass, and they put turf in it at Kinnick, and so they didn't have it there. And then I think it was COVID year right around that they had it on the side as well. Yeah.
I remember Padilla was a true freshman. I remember whatever year that was.
Yeah, he was
enrolled early. Anyway, I don't know why I remember that. I don't know why I remember that, but anyway, go ahead.
No, you're there. So, I could see that. And that's why, part of my idea, a 10-point plan for the offseason was move spring football from April to June. And part of that is how many players do we see it every year? Well, Jack Campbell and Seth Benson, they're coming back from an injury. They're not going to be able to handle spring practice because it's only 3 months since the season was over, 2.5 months in a lot of cases. And, they're still recovering. So you don't even get them out there working. So it's kind of a waste for some of your most important players anyway. And then you have players transferring, coming in, trying to make it in. They've got their own issues too, physically. If you had it in June, if you just let it be a workout period and then have a couple of mini camps and do it that way, then I think it could save it. And then if you get to June, you can have a big blowout. You can have a, Phil Kinnick Stadium on a Saturday night or Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska on a Saturday night. And the tampering's not going to matter because at that point, everything will be closed up. So that's something I would think is for the better.
Yeah. Read The Athletic and Scott's 10-point plan and everything. I like it.
Yeah.
With you. Anything else, Scott, before we say goodbye to the good people out there?
Well, I know, we talk a lot about the Hawkeyes, but of course, there's a pretty good hockey team there in Des Moines, isn't there? The Iowa Wild.
That's right. Yeah. Aiden, do we have any? We got some Iowa Wild promos this week or no? Or just go see the Wild.
In particular, go see the Wild.
Go see the Wild. Go to Wells Fargo.
I think they missed an opportunity. They should have called them the Wildlings, from like Game of Thrones and
oh boy,
But no, I would say that would be a fun one. Here we've got the Iowa Heartlanders, and there's got the Super Bowl
this week, Scott.
Who are you going for, Chad?
I think that I know this is dumb, but I think the Eagles are going to do it. I think Cooper DeJean and that defense, the Vic we as Bears fans, we've seen Vic Fangio have 2 weeks to come up with a plan, and that was basically the plan that the Patriots used to beat the Rams way back when in that 13-3 ugly Super Bowl with young Jared Goff. They used what the Bears did that year. Remember that?
Yes,
against Fangio. What Fangio did to the Rams that year. So I think Fangio is going to have something up his sleeve for Mahomes. I know it's hard to do. And what are the Chiefs won, like 1 million straight one-score games? Like, it's crazy. So you'd be foolish to bet against the Chiefs, but I think the Eagles get it done, and I'm just backing Cooper DeJean here.
I think they win 27-24, the Eagles.
Okay.
Part of it is just kind of historical trend that no team has ever won 3 straight Super Bowls. That's awfully difficult in this era. They have some impressive wins, no question. And beating Buffalo again is an impressive win. And it's hard to bet against number 15, who is elevated himself, I don't say this lightly, into the conversation among the best 3 to 4 quarterbacks of all time. He just has. And And so when he's got the ball and they're down or they're up or whatever, you know that, he's going to complete a couple of passes. He's going to draw a 15-yard penalty and they're going to pull out a win. Somehow somebody's going to hit him late or out of bounds, or, whether it's against the Bengals or a few weeks ago when the Texans players collided and over the top of him and may have touched his jersey and that turned into a 15-yard penalty. That's probably going to happen. Sorry, Chiefs fans. I covered the Chiefs for 6 years, so I'm not biased against the Chiefs. But
if you really look at the Chiefs 2025 version, 2024, 2025 version, they play just like Iowa. They have a good defense. They have good special teams. They have a great kicker. But they just have the quarterback. So they have the quarterback that can win you those fourth quarter games. They're always close in the fourth. Like every game is close in the fourth quarter, like every Iowa game, basically, right? I mean,
right.
And you watch the Chiefs. They win it with defense. They obviously they have a really amazingly efficient and historic quarterback and historic play caller and all that. All credit to that. But if you really watch why the Chiefs are successful this year, it's because of that defense. It's because of the way they play at the line of scrimmage. It's the way they can defend the pass. And, they really don't have like stars on offense outside of the quarterback. So, I mean, Kelsey's good, but he's
aging now. I mean,
he's aging.
He's a Hall of Famer for sure. And he's in the conversation with Gronk and Tony Gonzalez and a few others as the greatest at his position. I think the one thing I see with these guys is I'm going against like every trend that I normally would pick, which is who's got the better quarterback? The Chiefs. Who's got the better coach? The Chiefs. Who's got the better defense? It's about a push, but the Chiefs are up there. Who's been in these key moments and won these big games? The Chiefs. Yet, why am I drawn? I don't know, something about Saquon Barkley that kind of puts me there. I mean, that to run the football with that kind of effectiveness is otherworldly. And of course, we watched him play Iowa in 17. It was
and 17.
16 was different. That was just 599 yards or whatever offense that day. But in 17, that individual game was the best game I've ever seen of a player. I mean, that was, and they needed every single yard to win that game. That was a tremendous game, Chad. That was as good as it got. I mean,
that's
Iowa
good
lost
football offseason stuff. Is go rewatch this. Even though your team lost, go watch the 17 Iowa Penn State game. The Josie Jewell, what was it? The pick and does the swing of
Trace McSorley.
Yeah.
Well, and just the one he did that incredible jump hurdle this year. Barkley did. Well, what he did at Kinnick, when you think about it, he hurdled Josh Jackson, first team All-American. He was Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year. In the air he got hit by Amani Hooker. Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year the next year. And then he gets chased out of bounds by Josie Jewell, the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year that year. And Saquon Barkley. So it's just a dynamic play involving really good players, 3 of which are still in the NFL, and starting games and winning games. But so I guess that's why I'm leaning Philly, I guess. But, and I'd like to see Cooper. I mean, I'm happy for him. I thought it was kind of funny the other day on his media day. Somebody asked him who's the most famous person in his contacts, and he said Caitlin Clark. So
yeah, Caitlin kind of dodged the question of whether she'll be at the Super Bowl. I'm gonna guess. I don't know. Like, do you think it should be one of the Taylor Swift suite or not?
I don't know. I don't know. She was in Kansas City this week.
Connection. Yeah. Anyway, enjoy the game Sunday night. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy Iowa women's basketball Thursday night against the Gophers. I'll be in Lincoln Monday when Iowa faces the Huskers. And Scott Dochterman and I, Chad Leistikow, will be back with you next Thursday on Legends and Listeners, always from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.